There is a small gray object inside almost everything you own. It is in your phone, in your car, in your headphones, in the wind turbines on your horizon. It is one of the most important components ever invented, and roughly 9 out of every 10 of them come out of one country. That country is China. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 metals with names most people will never use. Neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, terbium. Despite the name, they are not actually rare in the Earth's crust. Some are more common than copper or lead. What is rare is the ability to dig them out cleanly, separate them from each other, and turn them into something useful. Each rare earth comes mixed with all the others. Pulling them apart is one of the hardest, dirtiest, most patient operations in modern industry. It involves long chains of acid baths, solvent columns, and electrochemical cells. It produces enormous volumes of toxic waste. It takes decades of accumulated technical knowledge to do reliably and at scale. And one country, over the course of about 30 years, did it more cheaply than anyone else, then more reliably, then almost exclusively. By the time the rest of the world realized what was happening, almost every motor magnet on Earth had a Chinese fingerprint on it. 20 years ago, China made about half of the world's permanent rare earth magnets. Today, it makes nearly all of them. Most viewers have personally held many of those magnets without knowing it. A single modern smartphone uses around 8 different rare earth elements. They sit inside the speaker, inside the microphone, inside the vibration motor, inside the camera focus mechanism. They produce some of the colors on the display. They tune the antenna. They allow the device to be small enough to fit in your pocket and powerful enough to be useful. Step out of the phone, and the same elements are inside the car beside you. A typical electric vehicle uses between 1.5 and 5 kilograms of rare earth permanent magnets in its drive motor. Most modern electric vehicles run on permanent magnet motors. Most of those motors depend on rare earths. Step out of the car, and rare earths are inside the wind turbines on your horizon. A single direct drive wind turbine uses several hundred kilograms of rare earth magnets per megawatt of capacity. Step further out, and almost 1,000 pounds of rare earths sit inside every F-35 fighter jet. Thousands more inside an Arleigh destroyer. Even more inside a Virginia-class submarine. Almost every system that uses a powerful, compact, heat-tolerant magnet runs through them. And almost every system runs, in turn, through the same country. It was not always that way. In the 1980s, the United States was the world's largest producer of rare earth elements. Most of that production came from a single mine in California, called Mountain Pass. Over the next 2 decades, that mine declined, production fell. An environmental incident in the late 1990s led to legal action. By the early 2000s, the mine had effectively shut down. And while it sat idle, China kept building. In the rare earth heartland of Inner Mongolia, the Chinese government invested at every stage of the chain. First, the mining itself, then the separation of the 17 elements from each other, then the refining of those elements into pure oxides, then the conversion into metals and alloys, then the production of the finished magnets. Each step in the chain is technically demanding. Each step in the chain produces waste. Each step in the chain takes years to learn how to do well. Over 30 years, Chinese rare earth output rose from about 31,000 metric tons a year to roughly 270,000. And as Chinese supply grew, prices fell. Foreign producers found themselves undercut on cost. Many shut down. Many sold their assets. Many of those assets were quietly bought by Chinese-linked investors. By the early 2010s, the global rare earth industry was, in practice, a Chinese industry. Most outside observers focused at first on the mining. How much ore did China dig out of the ground? How much did everyone else? By that measure, China was dominant, but not extreme. It produced something like 60 to 70% of the world's rare earth ore. But ore is not what goes into a finished magnet. Between the rock and the magnet sits the hardest part, the separation and refining stage. And there, China's share is much higher. Roughly 9 out of every 10 kilograms of refined rare earth oxide passes through Chinese facilities. Most of the world's mines, even those outside China, ship their ore to Chinese refineries. Even American ore, even Australian ore, even African ore in some cases. The rock might come out of the ground in California or Western Australia, but the actual transformation into something useful happens in China. And the final stage, the magnet itself, is even more concentrated. Roughly 94 out of every 100 permanent rare earth magnets in the world are made in China. By volume, by value, by the count of factories actually capable of producing them at scale. And here is where the story changes shape. Most viewers, when they hear China dominates rare earths, think about a single choke point, a mine, a government decision, a trade restriction. But the actual control is not at the mine. Rare earths get mined in dozens of places. Australia, the United States, Myanmar, Thailand, Nigeria. Each of those countries is, on its own, a meaningful contributor. Together, they produce nearly half the world's ore. But almost all of that ore ends up running through Chinese refineries before it becomes anything anyone can use. The control sits at the middle of the chain, the hardest, dirtiest, most technical stage. It is the place where the real expertise was built, where the real waste is generated, where the real costs accumulate. And it is the place where, if you wanted to break out of dependence, you would have to build new infrastructure, essentially from scratch. New separation plants, new refining technology, new magnet factories, all of which take years to permit, build, and bring up to commercial scale quality. While that work proceeds, Chinese capacity keeps growing. In 2024 alone, China exported roughly 58,000 tons of finished rare earth magnets, enough to manufacture the components for millions of cars, or thousands of wind turbines, or thousands of strategic military systems, or millions of industrial motors. Most of those magnets crossed an ocean before reaching the device or vehicle they ended up in. But all of them started from the same handful of factories in eastern China. Beijing has made clear in recent years that it sees this position as strategic. From mid-2023 onward, China has rolled out a series of export licensing requirements on rare earth-related materials and equipment. Gallium and germanium in 2023, antimony in 2024, 7 medium and heavy rare earth elements in April 2025, mining and processing equipment, technology, and know-how in October 2025. Each new control narrowed what could leave Chinese territory without a license. When the April 2025 restrictions took effect, exports of certain magnets fell sharply. Car makers in the United States and Europe struggled to obtain finished magnets. Some plants reportedly cut utilization rates or temporarily shut down. Step back and the picture sharpens. Almost every modern device that uses a permanent magnet, and that means almost every modern device with a motor or speaker or sensor, depends on one country. Phones, cars, drones, wind turbines, industrial robots, MRI machines, hard drives, headphones, power tools. And underneath each of those products sits the same small gray component. Compact, lightweight, powerful enough to replace much heavier conventional magnets, and almost always coming from China. Most consumers will never read the origin label on the magnet itself. Most products will not show one. Most of the magnets in your daily life were assembled into a finished product somewhere else. But trace the small gray disc inside that product back through its supply chain, back through the alloy that made it, back through the metal that made the alloy, back through the oxide that made the metal, back through the separation column that produced the oxide. And the chain almost always ends inside a few specific industrial complexes in China. Western governments have been aware of this for years. Reports, hearings, strategic reviews, industrial policy proposals. The Mountain Pass mine in California was restarted in 2017 by a new owner, MP Materials. By 2025, the United States had recovered to roughly 51,000 metric tons of rare earth oxide output. In July 2025, the Pentagon invested approximately $400 million into MP Materials. The deal included a 10-year price floor on its magnet output to insulate it from Chinese price competition. Australia is building its first integrated refinery. South Korea is consolidating into a non-Chinese supply chain. France and Japan are cooperating on rare earth oxide production. The European Union is funding a rare earth processing facility in Estonia. Some bullish estimates suggest that if every announced project succeeds, China's share of global rare earth refining could fall from around 90% today to around 75% by 2028. But that "if" is doing a lot of work in the sentence. Many projects depend on continued state support. Many depend on prices staying high enough that new producers can recover their costs. And in rare earths, prices do not stay high. China has historically responded to new outside capacity by increasing its own production, lowering global prices, and quietly forcing new producers out of profitability. It happened in 2002. It happened again in 2012. It happened in 2022, when Beijing increased rare earth processing by roughly 25% to suppress global prices. Each time, foreign producers either took losses or left the market. Each time, the structural concentration in China grew, not shrank. This is what makes the rare earth story different from most supply chain stories. It is not just that China dominates today. It is that the structure of the industry quietly punishes everyone who tries to compete. Foreign producers have to invest billions of dollars before they ever sell anything. Their facilities take years to commission. Their first magnets need to qualify with auto manufacturers and defense programs that have spent decades testing Chinese-sourced materials. Even when projects succeed technically, they often fail commercially. Either prices fall or qualification takes longer than expected, or both. Meanwhile, every new electric vehicle on the road, every new wind turbine on the horizon, every new robot in a warehouse adds to the demand for the same magnet. And every additional unit of demand sends another transaction back through the same chain, out of the ground, through separation, through refining, through alloying, through magnet manufacturing, out of China, across an ocean, into the next car, phone, drone, or turbine. Most people who use those products will never know. Most will never see the magnet itself. Most will never read about the supply chain in any depth. But every text message they send, every song they listen to, every electric drive they take, quietly depends on a small gray object that came, with high probability, out of one specific industrial corridor in eastern China. On the map of modern manufacturing, this is one of the smallest, most concentrated dots imaginable. But it sits behind one of the largest industrial categories on Earth: modern transportation, modern energy, modern communications, modern defense, all routing through the same dot. Western governments are now spending serious resources to widen that dot. Hundreds of millions of dollars in direct investment, long-term price guarantees, strategic stockpiles, tax incentives for new mining and refining. Slowly, and in a few cases successfully, alternative producers have come online. Lynas in Australia and Malaysia, MP Materials in California and Texas, Energy Fuels in Utah, Iluka in Western Australia, Neo Performance Materials in Estonia. But the combined non-Chinese refining capacity is still small relative to China's, and the magnet manufacturing capacity outside China is smaller still. In 2025, after years of effort, China still processed roughly 9 out of every 10 kilograms of rare earth oxide on Earth, and it still made roughly 19 out of every 20 permanent magnets used in modern devices. Most analysts agree the math will eventually shift, but not soon, and not without continued, large, multi-year financial commitments from Western governments. In the meantime, the magnet inside almost everything you own continues to come, in practice, from one place. The same was true 10 years ago. It will most likely still be true 10 years from now, even if the share comes down meaningfully. Most consumers will not notice the difference. Most will not change their buying habits. Most will not know the supply chain at all. But the small gray object inside their phone will still trace back, transaction by transaction, to a refinery they will never enter, run by a country they have never visited, built across decades they were not paying attention to. And the energy transition that the rest of the world is trying to build will, for the foreseeable future, depend on it. More electric vehicles will be built, more wind turbines will be installed, more robots will be deployed. Demand for permanent magnets is projected to grow faster than the addition of new non-Chinese supply, which means that even as new producers come online, China's absolute output may keep growing alongside them. Its share could fall and its volume could rise at the same time. Both pictures can be true. Both, in fact, are likely to be true. And underneath that math sits the same small gray object, compact enough to fit between fingers, powerful enough to spin a motor, cheap enough that almost every modern device uses one without thinking about it, built, almost always, in a country far from the device it ends up in. The story of how that happened is not really a story of one country winning a competition. It is a story of one country quietly accumulating advantages at every link in a long chain for 30 years, while everyone else assumed someone would eventually catch up. Catching up has now started, but every link in the chain has to be rebuilt almost from scratch outside China, and the chain is long. Mining can be diversified relatively quickly. Refining is harder. Magnet manufacturing is harder still. And the people who actually know how to do all of it together at industrial scale are mostly working in one country today. Until the rest of the world rebuilds the human knowledge, as well as the physical infrastructure, the small gray object in almost everything you own will keep coming, in practice, from there. Quietly, reliably, on almost every device that needs to spin, sense, vibrate, or move. For now, and for the foreseeable next chapter of modern industry.